Good evening. Welcome everyone from my front porch in balmy, buggy Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm normally inside in what is not a well-lighted room, to quote Ernest Hemingway, but oftentimes a darkened bedroom. And my two young children are inside, so I said, you know what? I'm going true Southern. I'm here with a fellow Southern author. I'm going to sit on the front porch, and we're going to do the event live tonight from the front porch. Welcome to SIBA Reader Meet Writer. I'm your host, Wiley Cash. I am the writer in residence at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, and I'm also the 2019 recipient of the Pat Conroy Legacy Prize. And I want to tell you a little bit about tonight's event, but first I want to tell you a little bit about SIBA. SIBA stands for the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance, and SIBA represents just under 700 independently owned bookstores throughout the South. And perhaps one of those bookstores invited you to be here tonight. Maybe you found your way to this event because you got on their website or you follow them on social media. Well, please, if you want to consider purchasing one of Heather's books tonight, please purchase them from the independent bookstore that brought you here to this event. And if you can and when you can, please support your independent booksellers in your community, no matter where you are. Tonight's author has a great new book out, and I want to tell you, before we start, to make sure if you have questions for Heather, after she talks about her book tonight, and she's going to show some slides and talk about some of the historical context in her book. If you have questions for Heather, make sure that you go to the chat button at the bottom of the screen and type your question in there. Make sure you mention your name and you mention the home, your home bookstore, your favorite local independent bookstore. And so we will get started. Tonight's author is Heather Bell Adams. She is joining us from the middle of North Carolina. Her first novel, Maranatha Road, was from West Virginia University Press in 2017. It won the gold medal for the Southeast region in the Independent Publisher Book Awards and was selected for Deep South Magazine's Fall-Winter Reading List. Her second novel, The Good Luck Stone, from Haywire Books. It's one of their most recent books. It's a new press, a very exciting press. Appears on summer reading lists for Deep South Magazine, Writer's Bone, The Big Other, and BuzzFeed. Her short fiction, which has won the James Still Fiction Prize and the Carrie McCray Memorial Literary Award, appears in the Thomas Wolfe Review, Atticus Review, Pembroke Magazine, Broad River Review, Clapboard House, Gravel, the Petigru Review, Pisgah Review, and elsewhere. She is originally from Hendersonville, North Carolina, and she lives in Raleigh with her family. She works as an attorney and volunteers on the Raleigh Review fiction staff. So I will turn it over to Heather to discuss her new novel, The Good Luck Stone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to Wiley for joining us this evening. Thank you to SIBA and to all of our participating bookstores who have made this event possible. I'm really happy to be here with you all, and to all of our reader friends out there. I know some of us have attended a lot of online events this summer and this spring, and I'm so thankful that you're here to share this evening with me and with Wiley and our SIBA bookstore partners to talk about The Good Luck Stone. The Good Luck Stone is about a character named Audrey Thorpe. She is a 90-year-old Savannah society woman who suddenly disappears when a secret she has kept since World War II begins to unravel. So it's a dual timeline story set in roughly present day. It's 2010, Savannah, Georgia, and 1941-42 in the Philippines. We have so many wonderful World War II stories set in Europe. We can all, I'm sure, name, our favorite World War II historical fiction stories that are set there. But I wanted to do something a little different. So I set the World War II portions of the story in the Philippines, in the South Pacific. So I'm kind of excited about that. It's a great setting to explore. And I had a lot of fun with the research. I've never been to the Philippines. I've never been a nurse, and I wasn't alive in World War II. So, this story did take a lot of research, but I had just the best time, doing that research and trying to bring the story to life. I have just a few slides to share with you all that kind of just introduce the story, both the present day storyline and the World War II storyline. So what we'll do, let's see if we can. See if we can pull that up. Okay, so this is the, let me go back to pause it. There we go. This is the Jepson Center for the Arts, which is part of the Telfair Museum in Savannah, Georgia. And this is a beautiful art museum in Savannah. I've been there many times. It's on Telfair Square. And this is where our story actually begins. Audrey Thorpe, our main character, is 90 years old. She is on all the right boards and committees around town in Savannah, including the board of the art museum. So as we meet Audrey, she is here at the Jepson Center. She's attending an exhibit featuring Filipino artifacts. And so that exhibit really brings up for Audrey the time that she spent as a nurse in the Philippines. And this is a part of her life that she has kept secret for a long time. Her friends and family, those who are still remaining in Savannah with her, don't know anything about this time in her life. And she has a good reason for that. This is me and my son. It's kind of an older picture. He just turned 17, so he's a lot taller than me now. But this is just to show we're here in Savannah. Our family has vacationed in Savannah for many years, and probably 20 years, honestly. And I always wanted to set a story there. For those of you who have been to Savannah, or, Charleston's kind of similar, Wilmington, where Riley lives, has some similar characteristics. It's just the kind of place where you feel like there are stories around every corner. And I'll show you here, this is a picture of downtown Savannah. This is on Gordon Street. This is Forsyth Park, a pretty well-known landmark in Savannah. And so, even if you haven't been there, you can kind of see what I mean, right? About this amazing southern town. There's Spanish moss, there's wrought iron, there are these historic mansions everywhere you look, flickering gas lanterns, beautiful flowers, gardens, courtyard gardens, water fountains gurgling. It's the kind of place where you walk around and you think, who lives here, right? Who lives in this mansion, this Greek revival or, Italianate mansion? What's their story and what secret might they have? So that's kind of where the Good Luck Stone started for me, just all these years of vacationing in Savannah. Moving to our historical part of the timeline, this is the Army-Navy Club in Manila in the Philippines. And this picture was taken around 1941. So this is when Audrey Thorpe, she was a nurse in the Army. She arrived in Manila, and our first scene in the World War II timeline takes place here at the Army-Navy Club. She meets two other nurses, Kat and Penny, at a gathering here for the newly arrived units. And this trio of women really immediately becomes intimate friends. They bond with one another. They talk about how they are afraid of what might happen. Everybody is anticipating that war is on the horizon, but they don't know what will occur. At the moment, they're in this beautiful tropical environment. They're literally at, a cocktail party at the club, but they do suspect that war is on the horizon. moving back to our Savannah timeline, we have a secondary character in Savannah named Laurel Eaton, who is, she becomes, in the course of the novel, a caretaker for Audrey Thorpe. So Audrey, as I may have mentioned, is 90 years old. She's fiercely independent. She lives alone in this Greek Revival mansion on palm tree-lined Victory Drive, manages very well for herself. But her family, as families so often do, interferes and feels that Audrey needs some extra assistance and some day-to-day help. And so Laurel Eaton, who is a 40-something, kind of down on her luck young mother, takes this job. She desperately needs the job. To come in, she comes into Audrey's home for a few hours each day to assist Audrey with any tasks around the house, errands around town, that sort of thing. This particular house is a real house on Victory Drive in Savannah. It's not exactly Audrey Thorpe's house, but it is certainly one of the houses that you pass along Victory Drive and that inspired me when I was thinking about what kind of house Audrey might live in. When we first encounter Laurel Eaton's point of view, she has arrived here at Audrey's house for her day's work. She's been working for Audrey for several weeks, and she feels like the job is going pretty well. She and Audrey, despite their obvious differences in society and life and socioeconomic situation, have sort of bonded, she feels like. She thinks they're becoming friends. So it's really quite a shock to her when she shows up at Audrey's house one day and Audrey has disappeared. She's not there. And so our story really takes off from there with Audrey on this journey and Laurel trying to figure out, where has she gone? Is she okay? Should I go after her? That's really the heart of the story. This is a picture of some nurses in Baton. When we go back, the last time we talked about our trio of nurses, Audrey, Kat, and Penny, they were at a cocktail party at the Army Navy Club in Manila. Well, things obviously quite quickly degenerate after that point in time, and war, of course, does arrive in the Philippines. These nurses are sent to the jungles of Baton, where you can see in this picture, they have these sort of makeshift quarters in the jungle. And the historical timeline takes us through the events there as they get set up in Baton, as the battles rage there and they're caring for patients, and the situation continues to deteriorate. It deteriorates to such an extent that our World War II storyline ends up here, the island of Corregidor, in the Malita Tunnel, which is an underground network of tunnels in the Philippines. And it really is a last-ditch retreat. Nobody is happy to be there. It's not a pleasant situation, and things are certainly becoming more desperate by the day. In fact, within a year's time from when we meet that trio of nurses in Manila, one of them will escape, one will be left behind, and one will die. That's kind of our World War II storyline. This is a sculpture by Rodin called The Three Faunesses. Audrey Thorpe, remember we met her first at the art museum. She's very into art. And she thinks of this sculpture when she thinks of her friends, of Kat and Penny. She thinks of this trio of strong women and how they are linked together. I actually saw this sculpture at the Jepson Center in Savannah. And this is a good reminder to me of the ultimate theme of the book, which really does revolve around friendship. It's a story about what friends will do for one another in times of war and in times of peace. And it's a story about promises that friends make to one another. It's about the sacrifices that friends will make for one another. And as it turns out, it started off really as a story of these nurses in the South Pacific who went through this grueling time together and how their friendship evolved as they had these life experiences. But the present day storyline is about friendship as well. Audrey and her new caretaker, Laurel, develop certainly a different sort of friendship, but a friendship all the same. And even to the point of Laurel's son. Laurel has a 10-year-old son named Oliver who kind of cracks me up. Whenever Oliver's in the scene, he just sort of makes me laugh. But he's at a new school and he's struggling with this concept of friendship and how do you make a new friend and what do friends mean to one another. And so that subplot kind of plays into the ultimate theme of the book as well when we talk about friendship. And this last picture is kind of silly, but so you see these are hibiscus blooms, and you'll see the hibiscus blooms on the cover of the book. The hibiscus flower does play a symbolic role in the book. It reappears frequently. Audrey has a brooch that's important to her that's carved in the shape of a hibiscus bloom. But let's be honest, really this picture is here so you can see Blue. Blue is my little Yorkie, and he's hysterical. And I promise he has had a haircut since this picture. This picture's kind of crazy. But that just gives you, and I'll stop this screen share there. That just gives you, I hope, a little insight into kind of where I got the idea for the story. The Savannah pictures, you can tell if you haven't been there, it's just a really special place. And I think will always be for my family. My mother-in-law lives in Savannah now, so we visit her there. I will also read just a very quick introduction to the book. This is from chapter 1. And after I do that, I think we are going to open it up for questions. So I look forward to talking to you all and answering any questions that you might have. So again, this is from chapter 1. If you remember our slide about the Jepson Center for the Arts, that's where we're starting this scene. Wearing the brooch was a risk, but surely no one would recognize it. Audrey Thorpe lingered by the wall in the lobby of Savannah's Jepson Center for the Arts. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and bright-sized crab cakes, while the museum's donors mingled and congratulated themselves on another fine exhibition. Audrey leaned against a linen-skirted table for support and returned a friend's wave across the crowd. At her age, the room's pale stone floor was almost as treacherous as an ice rink. She'd gone her entire life, 90 years, without a broken bone. Now her sense of balance worsened with each passing day. At home, she resorted to using a cane when she felt unsteady, but she didn't like to be seen with it on social occasions. The last of the evening sun filtered in through the glass facade overlooking Telfair Square. Trying to quell her impatience, she touched the brooch pinned to her dress. The cloudy green stone, flawless jade, still as smooth as when she'd first held it long ago, had been carved to resemble a hibiscus bloom. A tiny seed pearl glimmered from its center. As soon as her granddaughter approached, Audrey dropped her hand, which had begun to tremble. She didn't want Deanna to notice the brooch. This particular jewel hadn't seen the light of day since the war. Deanna, a 38-year-old woman who monogrammed practically everything she touched, straightened the name tag pinned to her navy sheath. It had been printed with Deanna Gayton, but she'd added Thorpe with a hyphen in blue ink. Obsessed with social standing, she used the family's name every chance she got. Are you looking forward to the new exhibit? Deanna tilted her head to appraise Audrey's dress, made of pale green silk, printed with purple irises. She didn't appear to notice the brooch. Then again, when it came to the family jewelry, Deanna had always been most interested in her grandmother's diamond-encrusted watch, an anniversary gift from Audrey's late husband. Deanna repeated her question about the exhibit, louder, even though Audrey had heard her perfectly well the first time. Her granddaughter often spoke to her the same way she spoke to her 10-year-old son. Audrey nodded. As a member of the museum's board, she'd studied the oversized color photographs of ancient Filipino artifacts, a stem cup and footed jarlet discovered in Leda Leda Cave, a copper plate inscribed in Kavi, blue and white porcelain from Palawan, a death mask made of gold, burial jars from the late Neolithic period, some with traces of their original red paint. It was astonishing, really, what survived, hidden deep within the earth while battles raged. So that just gives you just that little peek into chapter 1 when we first meet Audrey Thorpe. And this exhibit that she goes to see at the museum really does set her on this path of remembering this very tumultuous time in her life when she served as a nurse in the Philippines. And so the story kind of takes off from there. So I hope through those slides and through that little brief introduction of chapter 1, that kind of gives you a little bit of flavor of what the Good Luck Stone is like, what the story is about. I'm happy to answer, any questions that y'all might have, anything that you want to chat about with us this evening.
Yeah, we actually have a lot of questions and a lot of comments. A lot of people have already read the book and are saying very, very nice things about it, and not giving anything away, but very nice things. But I have a question first. When you said the part about and I'm glad I was on mute because I laughed out loud because I find myself thinking this exact same thing when I'm in places like Savannah, New Orleans, Charleston, even downtown Wilmington, or even like walking in Montford and Asheville, North Carolina. You said when you walk around these neighborhoods, you look at these houses and you think, who lives there?
Right.
And I feel like I never see anybody living there. I see people like working in the yards, people like delivering packages. And it got me thinking about this pull that Southern cities have on not just our consciousness as writers, but just like the national consciousness. I mean, I hate to say it, but like the storm that hit Hurricane Laura, I think is what it is, it missed New Orleans. And so it kind of fell off the news, but we still kind of obsess about these Southern cities, Savannah, New Orleans, Charleston. Why do you think that is? Why do you feel like we need these stories,
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think part of it has to do with the history in these places, right? I mean, obviously there are very beautiful and elegant surroundings, and there's this sense that these buildings, these courtyard gardens, etc., have survived. They might have survived war. They have survived, the migration to the suburbs when a lot of historic districts fell into disrepair. And I think there's also this sense of history in terms of familial history, that a lot of these homes perhaps have been passed down through generations. You wonder, what the stories are there. But you're absolutely right. I mean, all of the locations that you mentioned, I think any of us who have any inclination toward making up a story, all we have to do is walk a few blocks down these neighborhoods, right? And our minds are just swirling with possibilities.
Yeah. And I want to get to the questions in a second, but also I think part of it is that I feel like so much of the South, especially in these cities, as much as we know about it, it still feels so unknowable.
Yeah.
because it's so protected, it's so secret, it's so mysterious. I don't know, but that might just be my experience in Savannah. Last time I was in Savannah, I spent too much time in Pinky Masters. So that might be my problem with Savannah. But let's get to the question.
Better places.
Yeah. Let's see. Susan in Davidson, North Carolina, patron of Main Street Books. That's a great bookstore there. She says, thank you for this wonderful story. She is a longtime nurse. She says, how did you research the role of nursing in the Philippines in World War II?
Well, I wish I had known Susan when I was researching and drafting, because it sounds like she would have been an excellent resource. My mother was a nurse, and so she passed away when I was in high school, but I did kind of have this fondness in my heart for the nursing profession, certainly, and just right away knew that was, Audrey's background. I did have to do, a fair amount of research. There's not a lot in the book about medical procedures per se, but I certainly wanted to get the flavor of, what were these nurses doing day to day? What kind of tasks would they be assigned, and that sort of thing. So I don't shy away from research. I actually enjoy doing research. So yeah, as I was researching, the Philippines, the geography of the Philippines, and then certainly what was going on in World War II at the time, in conjunction with that research, I was I found some first-person accounts of some primary sources of Army nurses who served in the Philippines. Those were great resources to use. And yeah, I just tried to make it, again, without getting into a lot of the specifics of, how would the surgery be performed or something like that, but just how would the day-to-day life go? How would it feel to be a nurse in those situations?
I like what you're saying about the specifics, and I think that new writers or young writers can learn something from what you just said about not getting mired down in the specifics, just to give the reader a sense of it and then move on, So I don't know where I read it. It was in an interview you gave, or I don't remember where I read this, and it was just a couple of days ago. But you said, as many World War II novels as there are, or movies or things like that, that the South Pacific is really an uncovered literary landscape. Why do you think that is?
I don't have an answer for that, but it's kind of fascinating to me, because we really have for many, many years had book after book set in Europe in World War II. And don't get me wrong, they're fabulous. I mean, there are so many good books. And just for whatever reason, we have not yet seen as many. There are certainly some books set in the South Pacific. I don't know why that is. It's fascinating. And I really do feel that they're coming. I think that as readers, we are in for a treat, because I think there are going to be many of them coming. I know that Elise Hooper has one coming, I think, and Susan Meisner, in conjunction with a couple of other, Ariel Lahan and Christina McMorris, I think, they have a book coming called Angels of Baton. So that'll be, fantastic. So maybe we have that to look forward to on the horizon.
One of my buddies in town here, Kevin Maurer, has a new nonfiction book coming out in January about a battle for an island called Corregidor, called Rockport. It's a nonfiction book about the South Pacific. So you might have been right. You might have tapped into something. We've got a bunch more questions. I promise I'll get to them. Heather from Raleigh, another Heather from Raleigh, home bookstore Quail Ridge Books, and page 158 in Wake Forest. She says, I thought you handled plot and tension particularly well in the novel. Do you tend to start with an idea of plot in mind as an inspiration point, or also how do you use character and setting, and how do you mingle them when you're writing? She says she thinks of Audrey as being linked with Savannah. So what do? Do you think of like a really cool plot, this person disappearing and being sought after, or do you think of an interesting character and kind of get in there and dig it out? How do you begin?
It definitely starts with character for me. from the beginning, I had this character of Audrey Thorpe, this older, she's 90 years old, and it's 2010, otherwise the math doesn't work out right. We can't have her be in present day, but this older woman who is kind of thinking about her legacy. And again, she's, as I mentioned earlier, she's on all the right boards and committees around town. She has money, her family name, etc. But as her friends and family have, a lot of them have passed away. And she has this great grandson who's 10, and she, of course, adores spending time with him. And she thinks about, what's he going to know about me, right? And that kind of gets her down this path of who really knows the real me. And as it turns out, the Audrey Thorpe who's on the society pages in Savannah is not the real Audrey Thorpe. And so that kind of plays into our friendship idea, right? That our friends are those who truly know us. They know the hardest decisions we've made. They know the mistakes we've made. So the story really takes off for me when I think about character, and certainly setting is important. As I mentioned, I always wanted to set a story in Savannah. I'm from North Carolina. I write a lot, as Wiley is. I write a lot, stories set in North Carolina, but I did sort of want to check Savannah off the list. I mean, it's just such a great place. And Audrey definitely seemed to me like that Savannah society woman. So I start with these characters, and I also fairly quickly had the caretaker character of Laurel, and just how she relates to Audrey, right? She's not wealthy like Audrey is. She doesn't come from an old Savannah family. She's really kind of down on her luck. But how refreshing for her to encounter this woman who she might expect to be sort of snobbish, turn out to not be snobbish at all, but to really become a true and intimate friend of hers.
Speaking of friends, Becky asks, what inspired you the most for the emotions and choices for your writing about friendship? You do it superbly.
Well, thank you. That's a nice question. I'm always fascinated by the psychology of characters and of just people, right? Like, none of us is perfect, and how do we make the decisions that we make, and how I'm always thinking too about regret. And as we think back over our lives, even if we're not 90 years old, I think a lot of us still think over certain decisions we've made in life, certain paths taken or not taken. And friendship plays a really important role in all of that. At least it does to me, the friends who see you through those difficult times, or who are there for you, no matter what's going on. And then certainly friendships where there's been some betrayal or misunderstanding, that plays a role in the story as well. And how you deal with that, how you get past that.
To kind of go off that question about friendship, writing about women during wartime, did you discover anything? And speaking of war, there's like a military helicopter going over my house right now. Did you discover anything in writing about that surprised you, about how women cope with war, or unsung women in war, or just anything that surprised you about the time period and women?
Yeah, absolutely. So the story, when I said, one of the trio escaped, one was left behind, one died. The kernel of truth in history is that some nurses who were there on Corregidor did escape. There was a plane that left, and there was a submarine that left. Those who were sick or ill, or who had been there the longest, or had psychological problems, they were, of course, first on the list to get out. And then the ones who remained were taken prisoner by the Japanese. And I didn't really know about that. I didn't really, before I started researching, think about nurses being taken prisoner of war in the South Pacific. But they were prisoner of war for several years of their life, you know. And the really amazing thing to me, they all survived, and they actually continued serving as a nursing unit as they were prisoners of war. And that's just phenomenal to me. Yeah.
That's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
To continue to take that duty to that extent, and to never kind of give up your post is something we traditionally and stereotypically think of as something that male soldiers accomplished in World War II. And, you know, one thing that I think that recent literature in the past 10 years or so, the past decade or so, is really uncovering the role of women during World War II and the sacrifices that women made during wartime. Our friend Lauren Harr up in Asheville, North Carolina, home bookstore Malaprops, she wants to know, what's your favorite part of the process? Writing, revision, having written, doing the research?
I would say my favorite part of the process is revision. I stare at the blank page or the blank screen and just kind of think, well, I don't know how to do this. You know, I don't know what I'm doing. But if I have something to work with, I really enjoy the process of polishing it, you know, to kind of go back to this jewel that Audrey has, this brooch that means so much to her, you know, taking that raw stone and chipping away at it, polishing it, figuring out what threads of the story we want to carry through and pick up in different places. I feel like revision is so important, and I think that's where this, at least for me, in my experience, that's where the story really, you figure out what the story is, right? What's really the heart of the story. And then, you know, what's the best way, what's coming across on the page versus maybe what's just in my head that's not coming across on the page yet. To me, revision is where all of that magic happens. And I love it.
It's so refreshing to hear you say, and we've got a lot of comments that say, favorite read of the year, real page turner, couldn't put it down. So for people to have that response and to know that once upon a time you sat there looking at a blank screen or blank page thinking, I don't know how to do this. I don't know. I'm the same way. You sit down and you're like, who do I think I am that I can do this again?
Yeah.
Even though you've done it, you know, a couple of times. It is amazing. Well, thank you, Heather. That was really wonderful, and the pictures were great. And if you haven't read Heather's book, this one or her first one, please pick it up, and please do so from your local independent bookstore. Some of the great stores that joined us tonight. We had a ton of people. Donna just says, I love that you said that is how you feel when you see the blank page. So people feel seen, Heather. They feel seen tonight. But we had so many shout outs from bookstores, Fiction Addiction that we couldn't get to, a lot from Main Street Books in Davidson, and Book No Further in Roanoke, Virginia. I think that might be our first person from Book No Further. Ernest and Hadley in Tuscaloosa. I mean, so many folks from bookstores turned in. So please, everyone, purchase Heather's book, The Good Luck Stone from Haywire Press. Purchase it from your favorite independent bookstore, and join us next week when I'll be in conversation with Daniel Nayeri. He has a new novel out called Everything Sad is Untrue. It is a beautiful book with a beautiful title and a beautiful jacket. So until next time, please support independent bookstores. The same bookstore that invited you tonight will get you here again next Thursday night at 7 p.m. So thank you all for being with us. And Heather, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, everybody.